Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. If it is afternoon, if you're listening to this in a recording, we welcome you to our event today. Today we are going to be speaking about sucker punches, social engineering scams and trends. My name is Pat Turney. I am the Director of Partner Relations here at JMARK, and we are certainly very happy that you are able to join us today. We are looking forward to some great information. Because, you know, these webinars, they're designed to help you as a business decision maker just to gain more knowledge and insight into topics like this. It's going to help you. Our desire with these webinars is that the content, it's relevant, it's applicable, and it's going to help answer some of the questions you might have. So the presentation today should be about 40 to 45 minutes long. And during the presentation, you can ask questions by simply placing them in the chat window, and we'll pause it sometimes and answer those questions, and we'll have another time at the very end of the presentation to answer those questions that might have come up. So please stay for the entire event. We're also going to mention the webinar we have next week. And that is going to be another good webinar on business building topic. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to proceed on here and just mention just a little bit that, of course, this is me, my handsome face right there, and we definitely want to make sure that you have some good knowledge and insight from the webinar today. So a little bit about JMARK. We've been in business for almost 30 years now, and so we're excited about our 30-year anniversary coming up. We have over 600 clients nationwide. Managed service provider, we're in the top 100 globally, listed in the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies since 2010, and we have dedicated support teams across many different verticals. So we have these teams that are very aware of the different needs that our clients have in these industries. And, you know, I think this is very important. We're about people first and technology second. And what that means is we value the relationship over all the speeds and feeds. When we work with you, we're not going to come in and say, well, you need this box. We're going to say, what is the issue that you're needing to solve? And that's why today it exemplifies what our goal is to ensure that you are educated and you're able to take information and help make your business even more successful, and be aware of what's going on out there in the world of security and IT security. So with that, we are definitely excited to have Eric Cron with us with KnowBe4. Eric is a security awareness advocate. He's been around the industry for quite a while, security professional, 20 years experience in the medical, aerospace, manufacturing, defense fields. He's worked with IT security professionals around the world to provide tools and training and educational opportunities to succeed in information security. So, you know, JMARK partners with KnowBe4 to help our clients train their staff to be more security aware. So I'm definitely excited to hear from you, Eric, and I just want to say thank you very much for agreeing to share with us this information, and I am going to hand it off to you.
Excellent, Pat. I really appreciate it, and I like the way that you danced around there and didn't quite call me out as being old, but you know, lots of experience, and yeah. So it's always funny when somebody reads your bio and it's so much longer in words than it looks on paper. But you know, you kind of nailed it there. Definitely, I've been in IT and security for a long time. CISSP, etc., etc. I've seen a lot of fun things happen over the years. Now, though, I actually, my whole role is to talk about the issues that are out there and what's facing us and how we can protect organizations, which is awesome. The organization that we're with, you know, as you mentioned, is KnowBe4, and you know, Pat, I think I need to get mouse control. control here because it doesn't seem to be moving for me. But we're with KnowBe4. We're based out of Tampa, Florida here, where it is absolutely wonderful. Kind of sunny, happy place over here. Although I will be in Nashville this evening, where I think the low is about 39 degrees. So I'm preparing to freeze there. Our organization, though, we've been growing like crazy, and we've been growing like crazy because these attacks that keep happening on folks have been very successful as they're targeting the human element. Again, people, not just technology. And you know, what people have started to find is that if you do security awareness training and simulated phishing, you can do a huge job of reducing the clicks. So we'll talk a little bit more about how to make any of these programs successful here, but you know, this kind of gives you an idea of where we come from. And we see a whole lot of these attacks every day, day in, day out. We hear from people that have been attacked. So I'm going to share some of the knowledge we've learned from that. When it comes down to it, the numbers behind phishing are just terrifying, quite frankly. 91% of successful data breaches start with a spear phishing attack. We know that last year ransomware was $1 billion business, and it's just growing, and it's not stopping. On top of that, phishing is the main, the main attack point for things like CEO fraud and its cousin, the W-2 scams. And that's really where people either sucker money away from people or important records, tax return information. They file the taxes and create all kinds of havoc like that while making money as well. So along with that, again, ransomware, $1 billion business. I don't know if you guys have been following this today and yesterday or not, but there's a new strain out there that's wreaking havoc called Bad Rabbit. Mostly hitting the Russian folks, but there's no reason this is going to stop anytime soon. So last year, 752% increase in new ransomware families. Again, that $1 billion in losses, and we're actually even seeing it come over and hit the mobile ransomware side, which is pretty ugly when you think about your phones and what you have on your mobiles and what they're connected to. Now, on top of that, the cost of ransomware is something that not everyone really understands. Now, first of all, ransomware is very much based on Bitcoin, which is a cryptocurrency. It's an imaginary thing that, quite frankly, is worth a lot of money right now. Last year, it was about $1,000, which is interesting because that's about what the average ransom paid for overall was about $1,077. For small and medium businesses, that number was actually almost $2,400 for the average ransomware price tag. More important than that, in my opinion, or at least as important than that, is a typical attack takes about 32 hours of labor to resolve. So that includes the people that are just standing around, can't do any work because their machine's not in use, your IT department having to go through and re-image, do backups, restore stuff. All of that costs a lot of time, and this ranged between 22 and 38 hours with an average of 32 hours. And unfortunately, in this case, in this study, less than half that paid got their information back. Now, firsthand, I've seen that number a bit higher, but what we've been seeing lately is some copycat folks that their ransomware really has no way to decrypt the files. They're working on the reputation of the folks that actually do get their stuff decrypted, but really they have no intent on doing that. They're just in it for the money at that point in time. Now, this is becoming a big deal and a big business, and because of that, the bad guys have really started to innovate very, very well. And what's happened is we've got guys making really, really good phishing emails. Now, if you remember back in the days of the Nigerian print scam emails, right, riddled with grammar errors, riddled with spelling errors, that's no longer the case. These now, there are actually services on the dark web where the bad guys can send their emails to have the grammar corrected, the spelling corrected, and then those other bad guys that do this correction, actually, they guarantee an increased click rate based on them fixing that sort of thing. So it's become an entire underground economy there. Now, what we found in our phishing campaigns is about 55% of the people will click on a phishing link in under 60 minutes. If we could get people to answer like actual real work emails that quick, we could probably change the world, right? But as it stands, these bad guys have really, really good ways of enticing people to click on these links. And they use social engineering for this. That's really what it boils down to. And social engineering, is just leveraging the person against themselves to get them to do things. It's through these enticing emails. It's through other sorts of ways as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of that here as we move forward. So when it comes to social engineering, one of the first ones that we've ever seen that we all know about is the in-person type stuff. This is where somebody impersonates someone else. You see it in all the spy movies and all that, but fact is it really works very, very well. And a lot of times what it does is the bad guys are leveraging the emotions and the human nature to not want to push back, or the uncomfortable feelings of pushing back against something. So the bad guys are really stepping up a notch, and they can do some amazing things. If you have a chance, there was a show, I believe it was called Breakthrough, Season 2, Episode 2, that actually had a bunch of hacker folks. They were doing a penetration test over in a bank in the Middle East, and it was amazing how easy they could just walk in and plug in USB drives simply by looking like they belonged there. So there's that part of it, the impersonation piece. And like this is one of my favorite little clips. This is from a show called White Collar. And the premise here is this guy's trying to get into this radio station where they're getting ready to record some things or go on the air. And so he's coming up to the security guy and he's saying, "Hey, I ran out of hands here, right?" And the security guy's like, "Yeah, and he's like, "Hey, my card's here in my pocket if you just want to grab that there." And he's making it really awkward. It finally ends up being like, "Yeah, don't worry about it." And so the guy gets into where he's trying to get into. Believe it or not, these sorts of things actually do work. It puts people in an awkward position, and they don't necessarily know how to respond to it. So this sort of social engineering is incredibly effective. You have to teach people and let people know that the bad guys are going to try to make it awkward, and you need to stand your ground. But that's really not the thing that's causing the businesses the biggest issues these days, right? The biggest issues are well, we got the social media side and the phishing side, right? The remote stuff. Now I want to talk a little bit about this social media piece right here. Clickbait, malvertising, and infected apps. I mentioned earlier that there's this bad rabbit ransomware that's going around. Well, that's actually caused by an ad that was popping up, and it would pop up a flash update on people's computers driven through the ad campaigns. And if people weren't educated, didn't think enough not to click on those to update their flash, that's how the infection was happening, and it happened very, very well. The bad guys, when they're doing this sort of stuff out there on the social media, there's a lot of science behind it, and a lot of people don't necessarily understand that. Pattern interruption is what they use to create curiosity. And like it says here, it's based on the information gap theory. So you have things like on the left there, they just wanted groceries. Nobody expected this. And, we've all seen ads like this. Well, they leave you guessing. Sometimes they'll end partway through a line, and they make people want to click on it because they feel like they don't have the information. They want the information. Again, like Carnegie Mellon, the quote there, it will reduce or eliminate the feeling of deprivation. Very interesting, the science that goes behind this, but man, the bad guys are good at it. And it blows my mind, the one that's down there on the bottom left there. 5 things to know about clickbait. Number 4 will blow your mind. Well, that's a clickbait ad right there. Sort of coming full circle when it comes to that. But these are all very, very effective ways to get people to click. The other thing is they'll really leverage outrage and anger. Two of the emotions that we have that really drive us to take action, two strong ones are outrage and anger. So they leverage those. You'll see political ads. You'll see this in emails as well. Anytime that they can get an emotional response that drives action or activity, the bad guys are getting ahead. So they'll definitely leverage that for you. So next thing is the remote stuff here, the phishing, vishing, and the smishing. There's a lot of ishing there. And let me tell you what this is. Phishing obviously is the email one, but vishing is the voice. That's where people will actually call. I'm sure we've all heard the tech support stories where somebody says, oh, I'm tech support with Microsoft, so on and so forth. That's vishing. Sometimes they'll call and say, hey, this is the IT department. We need you to reset your password for your PIN. Give me your old one, and then we'll do a new one. They get people over the phone like that. And then smishing is a newer one. It's actually SMS phishing. So a lot of people have probably already received those text messages that says the IRS is going to come throw you in jail. We all know that they communicate via text messages when they're going to arrest people, but they do that. They leverage that sort of thing through a text message to get somebody to return the text, or it'll be your bank saying, hey, we did a block on something, click here, and they'll put a link in the SMS and take you to do that, and they'll try to grab your credentials for your banking. Never a fun thing. So again, like I said before, they're making these enticing. Now this is our third quarter statistics that we pulled, just released actually a couple weeks ago. And what you'll see here, on the left-hand side here, out of our campaigns, the top social media email subjects that people were clicking on, 41% was LinkedIn. That's a huge margin right there. So those sorts of social and media sort of things can get people to click. I always find it funny because the pizza one is always on here too. Last time it was 8%, and so it went up 1%, but LinkedIn dropped 3% from 44%. So I guess people got hungrier, but slightly less likely to click on the LinkedIn ones. But it's important to understand the bad guys, man, they can see your information on LinkedIn. It's called open source intel. And they'll get that information and they'll leverage it against people. So they'll do things like this where it's, you need to reset your password, and they get those credentials through these sort of phishing emails where now they have control over your account, and they can send messages to other people from that account. The other thing they do is a lot of people are guilty of reusing the passwords. So once they have the passwords for this, they'll try it on other associated accounts that you may or may not have. And if you've used that password in other places, well, that can come right around and get you in trouble there. Now on the top right-hand side is the top 10 general email subjects, not just the social media ones. And you'll see the number one for last quarter was the official data breach notification. That comes in from all of the fun we've had with Equifax and some of the similar breaches. It's all hit the news now. So people are believing that they're going to get these sorts of notifications via email. And sure enough, they're falling for it over and over again. The second one being the UPS label delivery here. That's another incredibly common one that we see all the time. And that is anything to do with shipping or deliveries, etc., are very, very powerful. Businesses rely on that. You ship a lot of things every day or receive things. You're waiting for stuff to come in. So when something comes in that says a shipment is delayed or there's something wrong with the shipment, it's a very powerful tool to get people to click on things. The other one is, when they mess with your money. That's always one that gets folks. And on the bottom right there, these are the most common in the wild attacks for the last quarter. And you'll see it's interesting. The LinkedIn one was the number one in the wild attacks. It's also the number one in the social media one. So this is actually really happening out there and continuing to impact people. But you'll see a lot of it has to do with either money or something to elicit that emotional response. A court notice is filed against you, right? Who doesn't want to know what that means? Now, most of us probably realize that that's not how that's going to be communicated to you. However, in the moment, if let's say there's something going on, boy, bammo, that's an easy way to get people going. And then, of course, the money stuff. So they're doing a great job with that. Remember, I told you those Nigerian prince scams, those emails aren't what we're looking at anymore. Well, this is one. This is actually from the wild. This is one of the most common genres that we get through what's called the Phish alert button. And the Phish alert button is a great tool. It's free. You don't have to be a customer or anything to use it. But basically what it does is it allows users to report the phishing email or a suspected phishing email to someone in your organization or someone, let's say like JMARK, a managed service provider, if you set it up that way. And it'll report that, so you can then have somebody that's good at this sort of thing take a look at it and decide whether or not it's really a phishing email. And it takes that burden off the user. The other thing that can happen with it is many times it will, if you allow it, doesn't do it by default, but it will send us here at KnowBe4 a copy of the email, and then we get to see all of the things that are really happening in the real world. So we take those, we defang the messages, if you will. We replace the links in there with ones that are not malicious, and turn around and issue those to be able to use them to get your users ready for in case the real ones do hit them. So this is one of the top ones that we get reported via the Phish alert button all the time, and it's ones like this ADP invoice here. Now, you look at this and it's a good looking message, and many times they'll use logos and the whole 9 yards in there, but if you notice, the address it's coming for is ADP billing, which is message@adpr.com. Well, the ADPR is a little bit off there. That's just a huge red flag right there. And then if you were to hover that link, you're going to find that it's going to the wrong place. So just a real quick glance over an email like this, and you can identify those red flags that make you go, ooh, something's a little off on this. And then hopefully your users will report it to you, or at the very least delete it. This is another one. This is one of those package delivery phishes. You know, your shipment has arrived. We need to confirm your address. This does have a logo in it. We did blank it out, but you'll notice here the FedEx email address up there. It looks like FedEx, but it actually is test1@merchminer.com. Probably not somewhere that FedEx is actually going to be sending to. So those flags are there again, and if you hover over that link right there, it's not going to FedEx, it's going somewhere else. And what it'll do is it'll try to get you to log in or give up some of your credentials when you go to that page, or it may try to get you to install some software to continue to track or approve this thing. So these are the things that are actually out there in the real world these days, and you can see why it's a lot tougher than it used to be to spot these things, because you know these bad guys are making a lot of money off this stuff.
So they're being very creative out there, as we can see, Eric, and you know, looking at more and more social media. For I mean, a lot of us have probably got LinkedIn accounts. We got Facebook, and sometimes that the line blurs between the two, where we might post some information that's on our personal page, or post information on LinkedIn that tells us where we're at and so forth. So this kind of leads into your next topic about CEO fraud, I know, and I do want to encourage others to, those who are participating, to please answer or ask any questions you might have, and I'd be happy to answer those along the way. I don't have any at this point, but really learning a lot. So thanks, Eric. Go ahead and turn it back to you.
All right, I appreciate it. Yes, CEO fraud is one of these things that is also a very big moneymaker. The number on this, last number that I've seen, was about $5.3 billion in the last couple of years lost to this. And what's bad about this is it's not always huge numbers. It can be 10 or 15K here or there. which is enough to really hurt a small or medium-sized business. But it's kind of like the industry, or these companies are bleeding from 1,000 paper cuts. Although there have been some individual really large ones, which we'll talk about here. But the way this starts can actually come in and be super innocuous looking. So in this case, this is one that actually came in here. I guess they didn't do the research and know what we do, but we had a new financial controller just had come on board, and one of our processes was to update our LinkedIn. So a couple weeks later, she gets this email, and it looks like it's from Stu Showerman, our CEO, and all it says is, "Did you get my previous message?" Now, this seems pretty harmless, right? But if you start deconstructing the mentality here, what's happening is you have an email from the CEO to somebody who's new on board and is a controller, a financial controller, and so they may not really know each other that well, and they, the new person is going to want to be trying to impress the boss, or make a good first impressions for everybody. So what will happen here is, if she was to reply to this and say, "No, I didn't," the response messages to this, and they will be a response message almost immediately. They're waiting for this stuff. The response message will be something that's going to be emotional. It's going to be, "Hey, I needed this done this morning. I sent you a message. I need some money transferred right now to this account, or something's going to go wrong." There's always some sort of a catastrophe about to happen, or something along those lines. So they will take something very, very innocuous like this, "Did you get my previous message?" And now they've flipped it around. They've put this new person on guard and on the defensive, and next thing you know, money's flying out the door. So that's one of those tactics that you really got to watch, and it's remarkably effective. How effective are these things? Well, this is one of the things that's happened recently. $100 million lost between two U.S. companies here. That's a lot of money. Not everybody has that kind of money, but if you think about it, you have companies that have $100 million that are still falling for this. Hopefully that'll tell you that, even the ones with the big security teams can be vulnerable to this if they're not careful, don't put things in place. So this was a 48-year-old Lithuanian guy who tricked two American companies into wiring $100 million. They got some of that back, but not all of it. That's a lot of money. I'm sure that Lithuanian guy is not hurting for cash right now. We've also seen it happen with this is a manufacturing organization. This is a multinational one. They lost 40 million euros, or $44 million, when they fell for this attack. And what happened is, basically, the bad guys used a phishing email. They got some credentials with the phishing email, got into the system, and they actually went around and they read the documentation, and they looked at files and figured out who can make large transfers. How does this work? What's the process? They spent a couple of months actually cruising around figuring this out. And when they struck, they hit a gal in Romania and had them send this 40 million euros out, which ultimately they lost almost all of that money. So pretty quick and easy on that sort of stuff in the big scale, but it also happens on the small ones. Now, there's a cousin to this attack, and we're going to start seeing this again here in the next probably month or two. This is going to start ramping up again. This is the W-2 fraud, which is very much like CEO fraud. CEO fraud, somebody pretends to be the president of the company or the CEO, and then they send that email to get people to send money. In this case, what happens is they're going to spoof being somebody in authority, and they're going to hit usually the payroll or the HR group, whoever manages this sort of thing, and they will get them to send all of the employee W-2s to them, to the bad guys, and the bad guys will immediately, usually within 2 to 3 days, turn around and have all of the taxes filed for those employees, and what do you know? They all happen to get refunds that go to these places where the money is removed right away. Then when the employee actually goes to file their taxes, they find that it's been filed already, and they're none wiser. Well, now it's months and months of stuff going through the IRS to get this fixed. It's a very powerful scam, and it works very well. We know of at least 120,000 individuals impacted this year. I expect that number is going to be even higher again. We'll start seeing these towards the end of this year and into the beginning of next year. Late in the fourth quarter and first quarter of any year, we'll see more and more of this sort of stuff coming up. And I actually had a very close call. This was actually here. They tried to do the same thing. This is basically, again, poor Stu. He gets picked on a lot, right? Because he's the boss man, and sent this and basically said they needed all of that, need them in PDF. This is exactly the sort of thing that happens. They actually responded and got a response back to him. Now they knew that this wasn't going to be, that this wasn't Stu, but this was the response down there. The guys, they got back to him right away. Now, I have my own personal story. I was working here in Florida for a company, about 250 employees, mostly developers. We weren't really well known or heavily marketed. We actually were kind of a service provider on the back end that provided some software that gets rebranded. The president of the company was traveling, and there was an email that came in to our HR leader and said, hey, I need all of the W-2s sent to me. I'm about to get on a plane because, as you know, I'm traveling. I got to work on these when I'm in the air. When I land, I got to send them to the tax guy. And, our human resources gal, something isn't right about this. And she brought it to my attention. We looked at it and found out that it wasn't from him. Indeed, it was a spoofed email. But what we figured out, the email looked beautiful. It had a signature block and everything. We believe that they got the information from the out-of-office response. That included the dates he was traveling, that included his signature, that included all of that good stuff. Fortunately, the HR person said something isn't right and actually gave me a call. We were able to spot that. And then, ransomware. Man, this has been hitting people very, very hard for the last couple of years. Again, billion-dollar business last year. We know that WannaCry really brought this to the forefront. We saw this in the news. We saw this hitting all over the place. It really, really brought it kind of out of the shadows and into the limelight for folks. This was something that spread incredibly fast. Now, this didn't happen to be spread by email, although there's no reason it couldn't have. But essentially what it's going to do is it locks down all of the files on your computer and then tells you need to send them money in order to get them decrypted. Sometimes the decryption works, sometimes it doesn't. No matter what, you've taken a bit of a hit there on time and money. The other thing is, if you're in an organization that is prone to HIPAA or some other regulatory insights, sometimes this can be an issue. Health and Human Services said that if you are infected by ransomware and the ransomware encrypts PHI or personal health information, that it is by default a breach, and you have to work out with them ways to explain perhaps it was previously encrypted, therefore the data is not a breach. But this can be devastating to companies and governments and other organizations. For example, here's a police department out of Texas. They got hit by Osiris variant of Locky ransomware. They lost 8 years of police department evidence. Think about that for a little bit. That's pretty brutal. Now, they said they had hard copies of a lot of the paper, but somebody's going to have to put those back into the system and redigitize those. They said their backup started after the infection. It just backed up infected files. Most likely, this was actually not a real backup, but it was the result of a phishing email. We also have Licking County, Ohio here. This was devastating. Took down basically their entire county government, 1,000 machines taken down, 911 computer centers were down. The county auditor, his response was, apparently our clock still works. So that was about the only thing left running after this ransomware attack. It happens to all different sizes of organizations. We've seen it from bakeries through, big companies getting hit by this. And the latest is starting to target the mobile devices, like I mentioned earlier. This one was something called Leaker Locker. It was actually Android software. This came from the Google Play Store, and basically when people installed it, they gave it a lot of permissions because they didn't know better. They just hit OK. And what this did is it then locked your phone and said, all right, if you don't pay us within 72 hours, we're going to email all of the personal photos and all of the information on your phone to everyone in your email contacts list. Now, we do a lot of things on our phones these days that deal with business. Imagine all the documents and things that you've downloaded to take a look at. Our phones are extensions of computers these days, and this could actually be devastating to a lot of organizations. I think we're going to see stuff like this getting worse before it gets better, because inherently the value of your phone and the data on your phone is something that people would be willing to pay to get back or not have spread out to everybody. And speaking of worse before it gets better, there's a new thing out. It's called ransomware as a service, and just like software as a service or infrastructure as a service, ransomware as a service means the bad guys don't really have to do anything on the back end. The developers create the command and control infrastructure and all of that. They run through wizards to create this ransomware, the bad guys do, and now they can send it to whoever they have on the contact list. But all the technical stuff is really done in the back end. So now non-technical people can get their hands on ransomware and use it effectively, and it's not expensive. So the top one there is called Philadelphia. Everything on that screen pretty much is customizable. How much to charge, any of the text in there, etc., etc. It's $400 to buy that. The bottom one is called Dot. It's also runs you through a wizard. They give you guides on how much to charge in different regions, and basically ways to make your phishing attacks better, because this is free and you split 50-50 profits with the bad guys. Again, you can get into this for nothing. All you need is a list of email addresses, which this day and age, with all the breaches out there, is not hard to come by. And then you can send this stuff out. So what's going on in the future here? Well, I love this comic. Sorry about that. I love this comic because it really kind of opens the door to what's going on. We have this Internet of Things stuff. Everything that we bring in and connect to the internet can be used against us, and we have to start thinking about that. We see organizations, it used to be bring in your phone, and that's your bring your own device, but now everyone's got phones and a tablet and maybe a smartwatch, and all of these things want to connect to our networks. One of these things being not secure can easily be a pivot point for attacking your entire network. So we have to start thinking about this and considering what we do before we plug it in. On top of that, many of these devices are not something that you can patch easily or at all. So as security professionals, we need to consider this, keep them in areas where they won't cause problems, or if they are, for whatever reason, impacted, taken over by a hacker or something, they can't get to anything that's really important. So this is a good one to look at if you get a chance. Some of these are pretty darn funny. My favorite's the broom down there. Send me 25 bucks or I'll tell everyone on your social network that you were stupid enough to buy an internet-connected broom. I mean, that's kind of where we're at here these days. And then other attack vectors. First of all, don't plug random things into your devices. USB thumb drives are absolutely horrible from a security guy's standpoint. They did a study with the Google Anti-Fraud and Abuse research team, dropped about 300 thumb drives in Illinois on a college campus. 98% were picked up, and 45% of those people clicked the files too, opened the files. They wanted to see what was on it. But that's instant infection. The other thing, like what's here in the picture, which is interesting, this is something that Blue Cross Blue Shield just did. They mailed out these sort of USB keys, wanting people to plug it into their computers. Well, how easy would it be to copy something like this? It'd be very, very easy to do and get people to do that. So if you get something in the mail from somebody, don't go plugging it into your computer. Very rarely can good things happen from that. And then on the flip side of that is, don't plug your devices into random things. I see these charging stations at a lot of different conferences, things like this, and quite frankly, it makes me very nervous. The bad guys or even some of the good hackers have done things that have shown proof of concept where you can pull all the information off a phone that's plugged in here to charge, and the person will never be the wiser. You don't know what's on the other end of that USB cord, so don't plug into it. Now, if you absolutely have to, use something like what's pictured there. It's a charge-only adapter. Sometimes they're called USB condoms, or a charge-only cable. What it does is it blocks the data lines in the USB so that nobody could actually pull the data off of your phone. And that, by the way, is called juice jacking. But more and more, if you think about it, when we're in airports, we're around, we see these little USB plugins everywhere, but we don't know what's on the other side of those. So just keep that in mind. Now, moving right along, what can you do about this? The best thing you can do is arm your employees for this battle that we're up against, right? And the way you do that is by actually doing good security awareness training. A lot of organizations do it only for compliance reasons, which is unfortunate because the threat out there is really bad. So if you're doing it for just compliance reasons, if you're just stuffing people in a room once a year, feed them coffee and donuts and show a bunch of PowerPoints, you're not going to really get very far with that, right? We have to take it a little bit seriously. Not only that, you want to train them, and then you want to follow up with the simulated phishing stuff. And the reason the simulated phishing is so valuable is it reinforces the training. So you've now taught them what to look for, and you continue now to reinforce that training by sending these. It also gives them a chance to exercise what you showed them in training. And third, when you actually do the training, you want to let them know, hey, at least once a month moving forward, you guys are going to get one of these emails that you're going to need to identify because we're going to be doing simulated phishing emails. And once that happens, the people are going to take a little bit more time and pay more attention with the training that you give them. Now, the training that you give them needs to be high quality. It needs to be something that engages them, that they're learning from. And it needs to be interactive, not just a bunch of slides on the screen. What you're going to teach them is, for example, in the phishing side, they don't have to be experts. This is 22 red flags you can quickly teach users to look at, and it becomes kind of a cultural thing. They look at an email, they look at that email address to reply to. Does that make sense? This is all done in a split second. And then things like, hey, I got this email from my HR department at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. If that's not normal, maybe we need to pay a little bit more attention to this email. Teaching people stuff like that, just the simple stuff, makes a huge difference. And when you're training the folks, the way you do it right, and this is regardless of who you're using or what you're doing, you want to know where you're coming from, so we highly recommend getting a baseline test. That'll tell you how prone your users are to clicking in the first place. We find it varies wildly, sometimes from 10% to 20-30% fairly regularly. Then you want to train the users. Then you want to phish those users and continue doing that. Like I said, that reinforces that behavior. It's important, like in our platform, if somebody does click on the link in a simulated phishing email, it takes them to a landing page that gives them point of failure training right there and says, you probably shouldn't have clicked on that. And there's all kinds of different ways that you can then show the data. You can maybe show them the email that they actually got and those red flags that were in that email. But no matter how you do it, you use it to reinforce that. And then you watch the results. As your results get lower, then you give them harder ones and harder ones. And you do it with the messaging, though, that we're here to help you. This is not us trying to get you, but the bad guys are trying to get you. We are trying to help you. And people need to realize, too, that things like ransomware, things like these scams are stuff that can infect them at home just as easily. And the skills that you're giving them help protect them at home. And how successful can this be? Well, it can be very successful, especially if you do things like this full random phishing attacks. We recommend not sending everybody the same email at the same time because they pop up and go, hey, Bob, did you see that one from Amazon? Don't click on it. That's not the idea. Again, you're reinforcing the training, and if one person is telling the other these things, they're not actually getting to exercise those skills. So you send it to random people at random times. You also want to make it kind of personal. You add their name, but you can also do things adding attachments, Q4 payroll, layoffs, company bonuses, whatever it is that you think will get people interested. You can even add other folks' names in here, and the bad guys do this. They'll go out to LinkedIn and figure out who's, the head of a certain department, and then they'll craft an email that says something like, hey, Bob, this is Fred from accounting. I talked to your boss, Gary, or whatever his name is, and he said you can help me with this spreadsheet. You attach a spreadsheet, and and that person is going to be very inclined to click on those. The bad guys know this. They know how to get this information, and they're leveraging that in the wild. Now, when you train people, the effectiveness can be huge. Again, this was 300,000 users aggregated across a year's time. These were randomly picked individuals, no cherry picking here. It was just random groups from, I want to say it was about 300 different companies. So initial baseline was about 16%. Again, I see it down 10 all the way up to 30, so that's right in line with what I see every day. Training them helps drop down that clicking. However, what will happen is if you don't continue to reinforce that training, it tends to go right back up because people are no longer thinking about it. But by leveraging that phishing piece and that continuous training and exercising of their skills, at the end of 12 months, a year later, that same 300,000 people was down to 1.2% clicks. Now that's 93% less clicks than when they started. There is no silver bullet that's going to stop everything, and we need to understand that. There's layers to security. But to reduce the click rate by 93% on the very thing that causes 91% of data breaches is a pretty significant thing. So if done well and you put a little bit of effort into it, you can make a huge difference. So that being said, at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Pat for any questions that we may have. I'd love to hear any questions that you do have.
Very good. Well, thank you, Eric. That was a lot of great information. And again, I just would encourage people, if you've got any questions, please go ahead and type it into the question box. We would be welcome to hear that. I will say that if we are using the Know4 program internally, and all of us have learned things. I mean, here we are, we're an IT company, and so it's beneficial for everyone, not just those of us that are geeks, if you will. The bad guys, as you said, Eric, are being very creative. It's beyond the whole Nigerian prince that has $50 million, and now it's getting a lot more personal. So we've got to be aware, and the training that Know4 offers through the security awareness training, it's really good. It's not something that's highly technical that only a select audience can understand. It's really tailored very well for all walks to have practical ways in which to be a lot more aware about being secure on the network. So thank you very much. So the way that you would get involved with a program like this, so I had a question. was that you just contact us at JMARK. We'll get with you on that. We've got the information. We can get you set up on the program, and so that'll be something we'll get back with you on, and that will be a great benefit to you. So thank you so much for that question. So yes, also I wanted to interject here was that Eric, you had mentioned about mobile devices being a threat vector, and
Yeah.
we actually do have a solution for that for mobile device management. So that's a separate conversation, but it's also part of the conversation. And are you seeing the need for having mobile device management as well out there?
Oh, absolutely. Especially if any of your company information is
Mhm.
being put on that mobile device or has connections. MDM is one of those things that you really need to do. There's a lot of reasons to do that for legal purposes, et cetera, et cetera. But if you have somebody, especially, folks these days like to use their personal phone because they have one phone instead of carrying two. So if they're checking your email on their personal phone and your business email is on there and it's getting mixed in with other stuff, you have to have a solution to be able to handle that, to be able to wipe that data if something goes wrong or if the phone is lost. You can't just rely on the individuals to be able to do that. So you absolutely need an MDM when it comes to mobile devices.
Okay, very good. Um, well, also, so we do have that, and we're going to also have this webinar is recorded, so you can go back and listen because there's just so much content. And for those of you that are clients, you can contact your account manager for more information, and we also will follow up with you as well to get you information on how you can take advantage of the training within Nova 4. So great. I don't have any more questions at this moment, so before we close out, I do want to let everybody know about our next webinar. It's next week, and it's actually a business builder webinar, and it's going to be on building your dream team, how to identify the right seats and the right people. So that's going to be a great opportunity for you to learn about business leadership, and it'll be next Wednesday at 11 o'clock, and you can visit our website to learn more, and or just send us an email at jmark@jmark.com, and we will get back with you with that information. Again, thank you so much for attending today's event, and if you have any other questions, please reach out to us. We'll post a recording of today's session on our events page soon, and we'll also follow up with some additional information. I really appreciate everybody's time. I hope it's invaluable to you, and thank you very much, and have a great rest of the week. Thank you.